Welcome to the TDK Ventures podcast with Inga Grieger of BMW Ventures. In this podcast, we will be exploring best practices in corporate venture capital to enable engagements between startup companies that the CVC invests in and the parent corporate. Welcome, Inga, and thank you for being on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about your education and your career journey and how you came to be at BMW Ventures.
Hi, Geetha. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this podcast and happy to show and to share some insights. So I would say it's not that only way to come into a corporate venture capitalist. And if I will look at my way, how I came to it. So I started my personal career as an automotive designer. So my background, I would say, is super different from that what we know from the industry at as well. So today I'm in the role for the business development manager at BMW Ventures, and this background helps me a lot on the end working with our portfolio companies together. But how do I came to this role is I started as a designer from a supplier perspective. So I know the automotive industries for more than 19 years, I would say now, and started on a material side in a leather manufacturing. Then I stepped into a first-tier supplier to learn more the role from design in the pre-development to engage between the roles to figure out what new technologies can bring on the table and see how we can bring benefits to the customers in this way. This was the OEMs. And then after a long period, I came to BMW, and my journey at BMW started at the design department. So I was responsible for the innovation management in the BMW design department for the brand BMW. This was also a very interesting role. We did a lot of internal work before we bring new designs on the road and to bring all these parts together. And after 3.5 years, they asked me if I want to build up the innovation management at the interior development. So I step out of the design and join more on the development part and to bring all these influences together, because internally, and already know this from a corporate perspective, you're developing parts and then you need your internal customer, like the product lines, to use these new technologies in the upcoming vehicles. And after sometimes one thing comes to another, the journey bring me to digital services. And this was super interesting for me as well to learn a car more from this perspective. So it's on the new BMWs to maybe you can experience the my mode on this, and this bring me through the whole car. And I would say I learned a lot about not only the cars, also about the structures from the corporate perspective. And at the end, it was luck that I saw these new opportunity at BMW Ventures. They were looking for a business development manager, and I thought, oh, this looks so interesting. I need to step into that one. And I must say, I'm now joining BMW Ventures since 2.5 years, and it's super interesting, super variations because the portfolio companies are so different. So I'm learning day by day from my perspective at that end.
Indeed. So actually, it'll be good to provide some context to our viewers about BMW Ventures. What is the focus of the parent conglomerate? And what are the investment areas of focus for the ventures team? And also, where are you based as a CVC? Is it in Germany or is it spread over the world? It'll be good for people to know.
Of course, happy to share. And we are Silicon Valley based, where I would say the music place of the venture capital, and this shows our independent and financial driven role from BMW Ventures. We are located where the investment grew up, and personally I'm located in Munich. So we have the half team in the Silicon Valley base and the other half is in Munich in Germany. So we have some closeness to the mothership from BMW as well. Even for my role, it's personally, I really need this close and ways. But for the investment team, I would say it makes absolute sense to be in the market where you look for the investments. So we are now investing with our second fund with 300 million, and we are looking for investments geographically, North America, Europe, geographic Europe, including UK and Switzerland, and also Israel. And our team, we are 16 person only, so a quite small team, more investment driven. So I'm the only person, you already mentioned that, on this role. So I also try to help our investment team on that end for due diligence and on this insight as well. But we are from a structure like a venture capital and with a small c in the beginning, because we are independently.
Let me just, so your investment focus areas,
Yeah.
could you walk us through some of that, and whether you focus only on the deep tech hardware side, or you also have a lot of interest in clean tech software areas?
Sure. We have 6 investment focus fields. So we go from car development, which maybe can be technologies which come into the car one day, but it's not a must have. So this comes overall in each of our investment fields, that our portfolio companies can become a supplier on one end, but they don't need to, just to make this clear at the beginning. And the second field is production. So new solutions in the production fields, and this can be worldwide used as well. Then we have supply chain to find new technologies in this field. And I think that makes it more and more important to have also a deeper look in this. And a lot of new companies are coming up in this field. Then we have the field, what is called digital sales and services. What does it mean? It's like market platforms or services around after sales and so on. Then we have information technologies. The name stands for itself, new technologies in this field around. And last but not least, we say sustainability, but this is more like a matrix functionality, because our fund, the second fund, which is in place since 2021, has a name, sustainability. So what we try is to support the CO2 goals with all of our investments on this.
That's a good segue to my next question. So what is your AUM? How many portfolios do you have? So you mentioned your second fund. So you may have a bunch of portfolios from your first fund, which are still in your umbrella, and you are probably investing from your second fund at this stage. So how many portfolios do you have on total? And in terms of investing, do you look for both strategic and financial returns, or is it one or the other, or a different weightage for the two? Have any of your portfolios exited?
BMW Ventures was founded 2011, just to give a short overview from this end. And the first fund, or when BMW Ventures started, was more like single investments. 2016 was the first fund took place with 500 million. And the investment focus is pretty much the same that I declared just before. We are more or less in this mobility focus areas. And we have at the moment 58 active portfolio companies and did more than 70 investments in total. We have a huge portfolio companies. Many news are hopefully come soon. So we have some in the pipeline as well. And so this is just to come back to your question as well. We are financially driven and look for a strategic focus as well. This is, I would say, super untypical for a corporate venture capital from a venture perspective. So we are from a structure like a venture capital and look on our investments on that. But of course, sometimes we have or we know out of the corporate background that there might be something interesting that we should step in from a venture capital perspective to be fast and independently to have a first investment before our M&A department take over. So we also did in strategic relevant investments, but from the main focus, we are financial active.
That's very good to know. And what is your typical investment committee process?
So we are 100% daughter of the BMW Group, and I think this is key for being an independent investor. So we can be fast and flexible from this side, and this shows also our investment process. So we are super lean in the team. The team decides about investments. So usually we have one partner and the deal team with one or two, sometimes three associates or principals on the side. And we go through a very lean process from an introduction of the company, whoever found out of the team, and get introduced to the whole team. So we discuss about it. We invite the company for pitching in front of the whole team. And we decide as a team if we continuing due diligence and at least about the investment at itself. So I would say this makes us very successful on that end because we can be very fast and we don't have to go somewhere on the board member and ask for approval on this end. So we just inform them, but on the end, we are really independent on our investment
So
decision.
it's mostly an internal decision-making process as far
Yeah.
as investment is concerned. And what is your typical check size and investment stage?
Yes, we are more or less between 1 to 10 million is usually our investment size. And we say sweet spot is series A and B, but we did some seed investments and follow-on investments, of course. So we stay very long with our portfolio companies to have the commitment on that side, of course.
So you do follow on whatever the stage of the company.
Yes. And we try to stay with the company till the exit or an IPO or they are acquired. So we are really strong committed to our portfolio companies.
So in cases where you do have synergies identified during your due diligence process for the investing, how do you enable synergies with the mothership?
I think this is super important because we have such a huge background, and this is, I would say, the benefit to be a corporate venture capitalist because you have the background, in our case, like more than 100,000 employees from a BMW perspective. And so what we do during the due diligence, we figure out where might be the most interest at the BMW Group. So we try to figure out and find the right opinions. So this is, I think, also a key for later work when I take over after the investment to find where we can find the first dots into the corporate. To involve these people and say, okay, please let us know your thoughts on these potential investments. Is this valuable? Has this maybe a impact for the future in your area? And this is one step. The other thing is also from a strategic perspective, and you already will have this on your side as well. On the corporate, you have a whole strategy, an overall innovation strategy. So we look where we can link into these processes as well. And the third point is what I want to figure out or mention at this point is we call it internal champions, what we build up. It's like a network which we have in place along the BMW group. So we've founded selected people, so it's not like having blueprint out of the company. It's more about strategic relevant people out of the corporate communicate or community, and they help us a lot also during the due diligence and after the investment as well. So they are more or less like our first contact in the corporate community where we can go to and get the approvals or maybe start an initiative afterwards.
I see. This is really good to know, and it's a little different from what I've heard before. So it appears that you prep the interested parties in the corporate even before the investment has happened. So there is an engagement with them from your end, if not from the portfolio or yet to be portfolio sent, even before the investment, and they are aware of the potentials for collaboration. And then once you have invested in them and the startup comes on board as your portfolio, you then have a prep meeting with them. And so they are prepped before the introduction to the portfolio companies. And then there are these internal champions who know the corporate very well and so can engage with the portfolio in a very efficient way. That's very good to know. Who could be these internal champions? Are these people from their R&D teams in BMW, or are these people from more of the operations end? So it'll be good to provide some background on, are they chosen by BMW I Ventures, or is it the corporate that sponsors them?
That's also a very good question on that, and happy to share more because they are so valuable for us, because they are like really the first step into the door. And we now changed it, or it changed at itself, that now people come over to us and ask to become an internal champion. So this shows also the initiative, how valuable this is in the corporate community. And we have a selection out of our investment focus fields, I would say. So we were looking for people along the investment focus, and also about when we look through our portfolio where we may have or need more potential interesting points, or where we need to come into the company. So this is a light of a mixture where we came up from this, and also of our steering committee and sounding board members. We asked for introductions for getting this initiative in place, and now we have more than 20 internal champions. So it's a community along the BMW group, from the different departments, from different markets, and so we have really good in place. And we do quarterly an internal champions call, we call it. It's for an update for the internal champions, because they are not cross-linked in their daily work. So we try to bring them together, give an update, what is happened on our end, what new investments we have done, how our portfolio companies grow, how maybe some new markets they entered, or what is beneficial information what we need to share with them. And this is something to strengthen also the community between the internal champions, and also between us and the internal champions. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's actually, I would assume they also benefit from knowledge sharing from each other. So there are always problems to be solved, challenges to be overcome in these engagements. So if a champion has faced such a path in his or her journey, then such a group get together would be ideal to share best practices and educate the others in the team. So I really like this idea. And once you have, so you mentioned that you're the only one on the business development from the venture side. So once you have the synergies that you have handed over to these internal champions and say they are ongoing, what is your process from the ventures end? So you have quarterly calls with them. Do you get updates on the progress during those quarterly calls? Or how do you enable the tracking of the synergies, especially because you have so many portfolios?
And I wish there will be that solution. So let me say that at the beginning. So I think we are all struggling with the same, because each portfolio company is unique and there is no process in place. So it's more about maybe to have some experiences which you can not really copy and paste, but you can recognize and use this again. So it's, on the one hand side, I'm always excited what the brain is possible to acquire on this end, and that I can recognize all these action items. But yes, we set up HubSpot as a tool. So this helps us to keep clear all these initiatives and have all these contacts, who is in contact with whom, and to have this totally overview. But at the end, it's not only the internal champions, also about the other engagements along or beside the internal champions. So we are tracking with this system after the investment process. So this helps a lot to get some structure in the outreach of each portfolio companies and the engagement, not only on the BMW perspective and also externally as well.
Would you be able to provide, without getting into confidential details, some examples for the CVC community of the kind of challenges that you face in engagement with the parent? And either you or the BD champions, how they enable to overcome some of these. And that is true learning experience for the community, I feel, because when you engage a portfolio with the BD, you realize that the portfolio is a startup and they are trying things probably for the first time. They may also be limited in terms of their time, number of people they can allocate, but there is such a great opportunity for the portfolios to learn from the corporate parent. The corporate parent, on the other hand, is an established organization and they may have their own challenges, such as focusing on their quarterly goals. And the pace of operation may be completely different from that of a startup. And there can be challenges right there in the two parties engaging. And I guess that is where your role comes in to ease this collaboration. But once they collaborate, what are the kind of challenges that you see? And could you share some success stories?
You really point one big thing about the difference between a startup and a corporate, not only in the size, also in the experience, and also about how they communicate, what expectations behind the startup or on the corporate side. And my assume is after 2.5 years now is at the end, it's about communication.
Yes.
This is my learning out of this. So it's more about to communicate and to understand who is communicating with whom, because from a startup perspective, they want to act quickly and they are so driven to bring their idea to life and into the market, and you feel the spirit and this energy behind it. And on the corporate side, this is more like we know what we do, we are the corporate, we are a little bit more settled. This is a totally different energy on both ends. So this is why I say communication is key at this moment, to bring these different expectations, eyes, how they look through their experiences together. And it's a little bit of translation between these both ends to come over these challenges, I would say, and this helps me in my role a lot because I have this experience from the corporate side. So I really know how or when do you need to go to whom, how are the processes, where's the right timing to step in, and so on. So I try to use my knowledge to bring these both parties on a same communication level and to bring these opportunities together, and that hopefully brings on a successful path for future projects.
Could you share some examples of these kind of successes without getting into confidential details? What kind of challenges were there? R&D challenges from the startups end, or were they more of integration challenges into the projects that with the corporate parents? Any kind of examples that you can share would be very helpful.
Sure. Just came one idea out in mind is I want to share Rapid Liquid Print. It's one of our portfolio companies. What they are doing is they are doing 3D printing, but in a gel base. So it's possible to print flexible parts out of silicone and to use that one. It's now in several industries and some starting in the automotive industry as well. So it's a small company out of the MIT spin-off, a year very young. So it's one of our seed investments, just by the way. And on the other hand, you have this huge corporate. You have this wonderful young team and with the spirit, and on the corporate they say, oh, they are so small. So to come over this and to find the trust that the corporate believe that they can do also the technique about they build the machines on their own and they print this material. So to come on these sides to build the trust and the reliability that startups can be a good partner with an innovation solutions to come into a serial product one day.
That's interesting. We have a similar startup in the 3D printing space called Fabricate, but they are in the metal 3D printing space and they can print really micron-sized features, which is of great interest to the corporate. Interesting. When you engage with the startups with the mothership, like the example of the MIT spin-off that you provided, after initial, say, an evaluation phase with the corporate, how does it move on to more mature phases, hopefully resulting in final commercial engagements? How do you enable pilots? How do you enable the joint development agreements? Who pays for the joint development agreements? Because venture investing is one thing, but now that the startups are engaging with the parent corporation, the question of who pays for these JDAs, or is the cost borne by each party separately, would come about. And so it would be good to share some of that.
Sure. And we have the luck that we have the BMW Startup Garage. So this is a really strong partner for us with the venture clienting model. So
Could you explain a little bit about what the Startup Garage is?
Sure, of course. The Startup Garage is the venture clienting. Startups can apply on the one hand side at the Startup Garage, and the Startup Garage is a BMW internal initiative. They help the startups to find the right contact in the community or in the corporate, and settle up a pilot project. And they support it with project management and with budget. We are really aligned very close, and when we did investments, we try to find the right person with the BMW startup to set up a pilot project. This is a really fast track. I will mention this because this is beside the usual procurement process to become a serial supplier. So this is more to have a first pilot project. It's running for 3 months, and to see, oh, the solution is working and it's trustful, because the Startup Garage is an implemented process in the corporate. This really helps a lot. So not all of our portfolio companies have the luck to get a pilot project over the Startup Garage, but a lot of them, and we are really engaged vice versa, because we introduce the companies vice versa. So we did both. We had investments and they could be able to have a pilot project over the Startup Garage. And on the other hand, we also had the same. We got introduced after a pilot project to a company and we did the investment afterwards. So we see how this is a good funnel for new startups and be in this area around. So the Startup Garage is one point for the budgets for pilot projects, but it's also about, it's very different in the corporate where these topics belongs to. So we have some kind in the, if we look in the production field, there's like a plant zero, it calls. So this is like a small plant and where new technologies get tested before this comes into a serial production. So they are autonomous at itself. So to find the right, or to introduce the new technology with the startup into the plant zero for an upcoming idea is also very good and very helpful. So I would say there's also not this one process. So it's also depending on what technology provides a startup, but we have several touch points on that. And just one point I want to add as well is, because I've learned this is also very relevant, if these technologies from this startup provide or find a solution for maybe this innovation strategy or the R&D strategy, this helps a lot. So if we look at the corporate strategy and find some pieces out of this, so that this is a solution for that, then this is like a speedboat, I would say. And then after, because if you look at the strategy, there's also a topic, and behind this stands a department or a resort which is responsible for that. So this is also a very good initiative and to start projects over that.
So the Startup Garage is a really great initiative for innovation from internal BMW corporation, but you are able to leverage it for your portfolios by engaging with them to find sources for funding for JDAs. But it's also the other way around. So the interesting startups that the corporation has identified, then when they work very well with the corporation, can become sources for the ventures team to invest in. So it's a two-way street, as I see it.
Absolutely.
So this actually is a good segue for my next question, which is what value do these partnerships bring to the corporate and to the portfolio companies? From a portfolio's perspective, as a startup, does it reduce risk and does it help them scale faster compared to a startup that is not engaging with corporate venture capital, but perhaps is working with a VC?
Definitely, and I think this is what we were just covering about the startup garage or another initiatives in the BMW group as well helps a lot. But it's not only about looking at the corporate and the mothership at itself, it's about partnering externally as well. So this is why I think also it's very useful to look beside the mothership or who are the suppliers of the mothership, and even so what helps our startups. So what I do is not only to look on the mothership perspective, it's also to evaluate with the startups what are your might be the best customers. So to evaluate the landscapes from their potential customer perspective to see where it makes sense to link in the startups. So what I also do is, and this is what my personal perspective helps me, is also very much is because I know how it is to be on the supplier side. So we build up a network through the supplier to provide this our startups as well, because this is also very good initiatives, because we learned also that not all is procured by BMW at itself. So to see how we can engage or make more engagements for our portfolio companies and maybe some more independence also on this end.
So essentially, you not only engage your corporate, but you also enable partnerships with BMW's channel partners, maybe tier ones or other partners. So in your experience, and you've been with tier ones, so you have a good experience from a personal end, working with the corporate BMW, working with tier ones. Now that you are in the ventures team, so do you find any, is it easier to engage with the corporate? Is it easier to engage with the channel partners? How has the journey been?
It depends, I must say. It depends on the startup and the technology. And I would also say about how is the experience from a startup perspective along the automotive industry, or where do they have their experiences? I would say this is something which is not maybe the first thing we think about, but this shows a lot about how they act and how they communicate and where to find the first dots and the first engagements. This is what we discuss also when I take over after our investment team and we do some kind of an internal handshake. The investment is finished and closed, and I take over from a business development perspective. So I evaluate on the one hand side with our team, what are their expectations, and then I speak with the startup and see how can we evaluate their potentials. And I think this is also a very good opportunity to see where are the customers and the development fields of this startup. And this is why I'm saying depending, because it depends on one hand side if it makes easier to go to the OEM directly or also to use this platform. The supplier are so super valuable, not only for the OEMs, also for the startups, because they are not providing for one OEM, so they are in an industry. So you're opening a door to maybe a totally different industry beside the automotive one.
Absolutely. And that actually is now expanding the scope so much wider. So not only do you engage with your corporate, but this whole ecosystem of channel partners, and that can absolutely benefit the startup to scale and expand their market cap. Very useful. But from your end, how do you track all of this? Or do you have to track all of this?
This is always a good question, how to track it. And because I'm always curious to see how the initiatives are going forward. And so personally, I'm more on an introduction phase. So at the beginning to start all these initiatives, and then the startups needs to take this over, because you mentioned I'm more or less the only person on that end at our fund, and I wish I could clone me and have a huge team and track everything, because it's always so curious to see how this comes to life and the projects are organic. But we stay at the beginning and we catch up regularly with the startups to see how we can help at this end and how does this develops. But at the end, it's at the beginning, and hopefully sometimes we stay longer till we see when maybe a contract is coming to life. So it's really, we look at each initiatives and where it makes most sense to step in and stay with the startup from our perspective.
I see. And you are in a unique ecosystem, I would say, because based in Germany as an automotive venture capital firm, Germany has so many automotive OEMs. Many of them have their own CVC arm, either from a partnerships perspective or from an investment ecosystem perspective, because the needs of one auto CVC would probably be an absolute need for the other auto CVC too. So do you collaborate with others in the ecosystem like Porsche Ventures, Volkswagen, or even other automotive CVCs, non-German based like Toyota Ventures?
Yes, we do. And this is also very valuable also to see from the co-investment perspective. If we had investments together, we also, or I also get in contact with the deal team from the corporate venture on the other side, because they all do it very different from their business development activities, and not only to learn how they manage that, also to see if we can along this perspective as well, so to have more engagement and be synchronized as well. So this is super important to stay close with your co-investors, with other CVCs from Europe. So we had co-investments with Porsche Ventures, with Volvo Ventures, Toyota you already mentioned about. So I think it's good to have the same or be on the same page, because the understanding is also very similar from CVC to CVC. And but the experiences are a little different from CVC to CVC, because the mothership and how they act are different. So it's always curious to see how they manage it, and how we can bring or help each other to bring these things forward.
Wonderful. So if at the end of our podcast, I would like to know whether you have any best practices or golden nuggets that you would like to share with our CVC community, especially as a deep tech CVC, and importantly, as a woman in a deep tech CVC that can actually help inspire others to follow along this path.
Really good questions, and there's so much I want to think about it, but just to keep it in some simple points is the one thing I would say: always stay curious. We all handle with so many topics, different technologies to dive into the startups and new worlds and new opportunities. So I think this is one key, to stay curious on one hand side and to support our portfolio companies at its best. So this brings me to the second point, is the network. Without network, you can't provide at its best for your startups or on the mothership side as well. So to have a trustful and a reliable network, not only about just reaching out, hey, I am, that's it. It's more about have a really trustful personal network. That is what I think is the most key in this area. And we also learn, and this is what I dig into also as well, is about the women area, not only about the women area, also diversity around that. Keep the spirit, use the spirit, and this helps also a lot, and find new contacts, and it's a motivation to bring new ideas to life. We really support this as well on that end. And last but not least, maybe just one thing I want to share is the VC platform, which helps also a lot. It's I would say, the one and only platform worldwide which acts globally in the role of platform business development, value creation. So to find partners in the field, and just to have someone around to catch up ideas, to work on the same problems, the same challenges. Problems, I don't really like that word, really. It's more the challenges, because we always look in innovation paths. So there is no path before. We always have to figure out new paths for our startups, for our opportunities, for our growing portfolio. And so to have a strong community on this end also helps a lot.
That was a great takeaway. And for me, that resonates so much because it's the same thing that I connect with too, that you need to be curious all your life. And that is what opens up new opportunities or even helps you identify new opportunities. And it's so important to build relationships that can support you through your journeys. Thank you, Inga. Really appreciate your time. A lot of the golden nuggets and insights and takeaways in the interview for not just our CVC community, but for the wider audience as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Geetha. It was a really enjoyable time, and looking forward. And whenever someone want to catch up, happy to reach out.